Mark Kelly just faced the shock of his political life. Watch as a courtroom explosion leaves him stunned. The Democratic Party in chaos, and Jasmine Crockett's sharp analysis goes viral. You won't believe what happened next. The political world was already on edge when news broke that Mark Kelly, once a rising star within the Democratic Party, was facing unprecedented backlash. The latest court-martial revelations had not only embarrassed him personally, but were now threatening to shake the foundations of his party. Within hours, whispers became headlines, and whispers of party expulsion began circulating in Washington circles. No one had expected a figure of Kelly's stature to be cornered like this. But the explosive details emerging from the court-martial made it impossible to ignore. At a packed press conference, reporters jostled for space as Kelly attempted to maintain composure. Cameras flashed, capturing every bead of sweat and every subtle grimace. For a man known for his calm demeanor, this was uncharted territory. Political analysts were quick to point out that the court-martial proceedings had uncovered actions that many considered reckless and politically damaging. It wasn't just about legal culpability, it was the optics. The optics that threatened to define his career for years to come. Inside the party, the mood was tense. Senior leaders convened emergency meetings, debating the potential fallout and strategizing damage control. Many were torn between loyalty to a fellow Democrat and the necessity to uphold party integrity. Conversations that usually remained behind closed doors were now leaking to the press, amplifying the chaos. Calls for Kelly's resignation, or at the very least, distancing him from key party roles, were growing louder by the hour. Social media, as always, acted as a magnifying lens, turning every statement into a viral moment, every misstep into a trending discussion. Meanwhile, public opinion was shifting fast. Constituents who once celebrated Kelly's achievements now demanded accountability. Political commentators dissected every angle, every possible implication of the scandal, while rival politicians saw an opportunity to capitalize on the disruption. The narrative was shifting quickly, painting a picture of a party struggling to contain an internal crisis that threatened to become national news. Kelly's allies, sensing the urgency, scrambled to defend him, but the mounting evidence from the court-martial made their job nearly impossible. The footage, documents, and testimonies were damning, leaving little room for ambiguity. Even within Kelly's own office, aides and advisors were on edge. Meetings that were supposed to focus on legislative priorities turned into crisis sessions, with every decision scrutinized for potential fallout. Communications teams worked frantically to craft statements, interviews, and social media posts that could salvage credibility, but the pace of the scandal outstripped their efforts. Journalists from across the country descended on Washington, each looking for the story that would cement this moment in political history. Every tweet, every statement, every leaked detail was amplified, forcing the party to react faster than ever before. Amid the chaos, Jasmine Crockett's sharp analysis of the situation began circulating widely. Her breakdown of the court-martial proceedings and the political implications highlighted what many were thinking privately. The Democratic Party was facing a defining moment. Crockett's commentary didn't just expose the scandal, it framed it in a way that resonated with voters, party members, and the media alike. She highlighted the key decisions, the missteps, and the consequences that were now threatening Kelly's political future. Clips of her remarks quickly went viral, dominating news cycles and social platforms. Her ability to articulate the seriousness of the situation, without hyperbole but with clear urgency, made her a focal point in the unfolding drama. As the day progressed, pressure on party leadership intensified. Calls for Kelly's removal from committees, from key legislative responsibilities, and eventually from the party itself were no longer whispers, they became public demands. The media covered every angle: the political calculations, the internal power struggles, and the public backlash. Analysts debated whether the party would move swiftly or attempt a slow, calculated distancing strategy. The stakes were high. Any misstep could alienate voters, give opponents ammunition, and leave the party looking weak or divided at a critical political juncture by evening. The first formal statements from the party began to emerge, carefully worded, measured, but unmistakably signaling disapproval. These messages set the tone for what was to come. The scandal was no longer confined to courtrooms or private discussions. It had entered the public sphere, forcing every political actor to take a stance. Kelly's once promising trajectory had taken a dramatic turn, and every decision, every comment, every public appearance now carried enormous weight. The morning after the scandal broke, Washington was electric. Journalists, political commentators, and social media users were dissecting every facet of Mark Kelly's court-martial, replaying moments, analyzing statements, and speculating on the inevitable consequences. Newsrooms labeled it the most explosive political fallout in recent Democratic history, while analysts debated the likelihood of Kelly retaining his party standing. Every angle of the story was examined, every detail amplified, making it impossible for Kelly or his allies to regain control of the narrative. Inside the Democratic Party's leadership offices, panic simmered just beneath the surface. Senior advisors weighed the risks of defending Kelly versus the long-term consequences of inaction. Conversations once private were now broadcast through leaks, painting a vivid picture of a party in crisis. Emails, memos, and internal chats revealed growing frustrations. Some argued for swift action to expel Kelly, while others cautioned against hasty decisions that might backfire politically. The rift between pragmatic damage control and party loyalty became increasingly visible. And with every passing hour, the pressure mounted up across the country. Voters reacted with shock and disbelief. Constituents who had once admired Kelly's work now questioned his judgment and integrity. Social media exploded with hashtags demanding accountability, ranging from #KellyMustGo to #court-martial-scandal. Influencers and political commentators amplified the situation, creating viral clips that circulated globally. Meanwhile, opposing politicians saw an opening to press their advantage, framing the scandal as a systemic failure within the Democratic Party. It was no longer a story about a single politician. It had become a litmus test for leadership, integrity, and accountability within the party itself. The narrative took another sharp turn when Jasmine Crockett weighed in. Her precise, no-nonsense commentary dissected Kelly's actions and the broader implications for the party. She highlighted the missteps that led to the court-martial, the political ramifications, and the urgent need for accountability. Her analysis went viral within minutes, shared widely on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, drawing millions of views and cementing her as a leading voice in this political upheaval. Crockett's ability to communicate the gravity of the situation while remaining measured and factual resonated deeply with the public, further increasing pressure on party leaders to act decisively. Meanwhile, Kelly's public appearances became increasingly scrutinized. Every statement he made was analyzed for tone, content, and implication. Press conferences, interviews, and social media posts were dissected with surgical precision. Any misstep, any hesitation became fodder for news cycles, further eroding his credibility. Political strategists noted that the scandal had reached a tipping point. The party could either isolate Kelly to protect itself or risk being dragged deeper into controversy. With stakes this high, even minor errors carried catastrophic potential. Back in the party's war rooms, the strategy sessions intensified. Advisors debated messaging, timing, and the optics of each possible action. The idea of formally removing Kelly from key committees or stripping him of leadership roles was discussed extensively. Some advocated for a slow, controlled approach to avoid appearing reactionary. Others pushed for immediate, decisive action to restore voter confidence. Meanwhile, opposition campaigns pounced. using Kelly's court-martial as a wedge to attack the party, framing the scandal as indicative of larger systemic issues. Every move had to be calculated. Every decision weighed against potential political fallout. Social media continued to play a defining role. Memes, short video clips, and viral commentary spread faster than any official statement. Audiences dissected every nuance of the scandal, often interpreting actions in ways party leaders had not anticipated. Public sentiment was volatile, shifting rapidly with each new revelation or commentary. This digital amplification forced the Democratic Party to act faster, with less room for miscalculation. Every press briefing, official statement, and response had to be meticulously crafted to maintain credibility, manage optics, and contain damage by mid-afternoon. The first concrete responses from party leadership began to surface. Carefully worded statements emphasized accountability, transparency, and the importance of upholding party integrity, while implicitly signaling that Kelly's position within the party was now tenuous. These statements were broadcast widely, dissected by commentators, and shared by millions online. Analysts noted that the messaging struck a balance between condemnation and caution, reflecting the party's awareness of the delicate political landscape. Kelly's allies scrambled to issue support, but even they struggled to counteract the growing narrative of a leader under siege. As the day progressed, it became increasingly clear that the court-martial was more than a legal proceeding. It had evolved into a political earthquake. Every conversation in party offices, every social media post, and every media segment contributed to a storm that Kelly could no longer control. The focus was no longer just on him. It was on the party, its leaders, and the potential implications for upcoming elections. The pressure mounted with each passing hour, leaving Kelly, his team, and the Democratic Party leadership in a high-stakes battle against time, perception, and public scrutiny. As evening fell over Washington, the intensity surrounding Mark Kelly's court-martial and the subsequent political fallout showed no signs of diminishing. Inside the Democratic Party's leadership offices, discussions shifted from immediate damage control to long-term strategic implications. Party strategists debated how this scandal could impact upcoming elections, particularly in swing states where Kelly's credibility had once been a strong asset. Every advisor understood that the stakes were no longer limited to one individual. They encompassed the party's reputation, voter confidence, and the trust of millions who had looked to its leadership for stability. Meanwhile, media coverage became relentless. Cable networks, online news platforms, and social media channels dissected every word, gesture, and facial expression from Kelly's court appearances. Analysts debated the severity of the punishment, whether it was politically motivated, and what it signaled about accountability within the party. Each replayed moment fueled the narrative of a politician who had overstepped boundaries, and public interest continued to surge. Commentary from prominent figures, including Jasmine Crockett, further amplified the story with her precise analysis, breaking down the legal, political, and ethical dimensions of the scandal. Across the country, constituents expressed outrage, disappointment, and disbelief. Town halls, local news segments, and social media posts reflected a growing sentiment that action needed to be taken. Voters questioned how someone embroiled in such a public court-martial could continue to represent their interests. The scandal, originally confined to the court and party leadership offices, had now reached living rooms, offices, and classrooms nationwide. The conversation had shifted from legal proceedings to ethical leadership and accountability, highlighting the political ripple effect that even a single high-profile case could generate. Inside Kelly's camp, attempts to manage optics proved increasingly challenging. Every statement, apology, or clarification was met with scrutiny and often skepticism. Supporters attempted to frame the narrative as a misunderstanding or exaggeration. But social media and news cycles moved too quickly to allow for controlled messaging. Analysts noted that Kelly's reactive approach was insufficient in the face of real-time public judgment and viral commentary. Each passing hour seemed to deepen the perception of a leadership crisis, and the pressure mounted to find a decisive, credible response before the scandal further eroded confidence in his office. The Democratic Party, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure from both internal and external sources. Senior leaders weighed whether a formal expulsion, suspension, or demotion was necessary to protect the party's image. Advocates for swift action argued that any delay could signal weakness or tolerance for misconduct, while others warned that overly aggressive measures could alienate Kelly's supporters or provoke legal challenges. The debate highlighted a broader tension within political organizations, balancing loyalty, optics, and accountability in the face of unprecedented scrutiny. As the hours passed, Jasmine Crockett's voice remained a central point in the conversation. Her statements, delivered with clarity and authority, cut through partisan spin and resonated with a wide audience. She outlined the consequences of Kelly's actions, contextualized the political stakes, and emphasized the need for transparent, ethical governance. Clips of her commentary spread rapidly online, racking up millions of views and prompting further discussion across traditional and digital media platforms. Her ability to communicate complex political realities in a compelling, digestible way made her analysis particularly influential, further shaping public perception of the unfolding crisis. In parallel, Kelly's political opponents capitalized on the situation. Campaigns, think tanks, and advocacy groups highlighted the scandal in their messaging, framing it as evidence of systemic problems within the party. Press releases, op-eds, and digital campaigns all leveraged the controversy to gain traction and influence public opinion. The narrative had evolved. What began as a legal proceeding was now a multi-layered political storm, encompassing ethics, leadership, voter trust, and national attention. Each statement, tweet, or media segment added fuel to the growing fire, leaving little room for missteps or miscalculations. By nightfall, Washington felt like a city under siege from political chaos. Social media continued to amplify every development, while the party worked feverishly to craft a cohesive response. Analysts and commentators predicted that the fallout would dominate headlines for weeks, perhaps months, affecting everything from committee assignments to policy negotiations. Kelly's position had become precarious, and every strategic decision carried far-reaching consequences. The city braced for further developments, knowing that the court-martial scandal was far from over, and that the political earthquake it triggered would continue to reshape the landscape in ways no one could yet predict. The following morning, the Capitol was buzzing with heightened tension. Politicians, aides, and journalists arrived early, fully aware that the fallout from Mark Kelly's court-martial was far from over. The Democratic Party's leadership convened an emergency meeting, reviewing every possible scenario to mitigate the damage. Every word uttered in public, every tweet or press release was scrutinized for its potential impact. The room was thick with unease. Even seasoned political veterans acknowledged that crises of this magnitude were rare and often unpredictable. Kelly, meanwhile, faced increasing isolation. Allies who had previously offered cautious support began to distance themselves, wary of association with a scandal that had captured national attention. Staff members worked tirelessly to craft statements that would appear contrite yet firm, attempting to shift focus from personal failings to policy priorities. Yet with social media amplifying every misstep and clip from the court-martial going viral, their efforts often fell short. Analysts observed that in today's political climate, where instant public judgment is relentless, controlling the narrative was an almost impossible task. In the public arena, Jasmine Crockett's influence continued to surge. Her sharp analysis and concise breakdown of the scandal resonated with both party loyalists and independent voters. She highlighted the ethical implications of Kelly's actions framing them within the broader context of accountability and governance. Her commentary was not merely reactionary. It was structured, pointed, and persuasive, striking a chord with a public hungry for transparency. Across news cycles, her voice became the benchmark against which Kelly's responses were measured, creating a dramatic contrast between authority and defensiveness. The scandal also prompted renewed debate within the Senate. Lawmakers from both parties analyzed the court-martial's legal and political ramifications, with some questioning whether existing mechanisms for oversight were sufficient. But the conversation extended beyond Kelly's personal conduct, touching on the responsibilities of elected officials and the expectations of public service. Legal experts appeared on panels to explain the nuances of the case, while political commentators assessed how this would affect upcoming midterms and party leadership dynamics. Every angle was explored, dissected, and debated, turning the scandal into a multifaceted national conversation. Meanwhile, social media platforms amplified the situation exponentially. Clips of Kelly's court appearances, coupled with reactions from political analysts like Crockett, went viral, generating millions of views in a matter of hours. Hashtags trended across platforms, sparking discussions that transcended traditional political boundaries. Public sentiment, often volatile and rapidly shifting, became an essential factor in shaping how the story unfolded. Viral content, memes, and commentary fueled both outrage and curiosity, keeping the narrative alive and ensuring that the scandal remained in the public eye far longer than typical political controversies. As the day progressed, internal discussions within the Democratic Party became increasingly fraught. Debates centered around whether to formally censure Kelly, demand resignation, or implement stricter oversight measures. Each option carried substantial political risk, yet inaction was considered equally dangerous. Party strategists understood that public perception, influenced heavily by viral moments and expert commentary, could dictate the party's credibility for years to come. Every decision was weighed against the potential for long-term ramifications, making the environment both high-stakes and unforgiving. Kelly's own communications team attempted to pivot, emphasizing policy achievements and public service records, yet these efforts struggle to gain traction. The narrative had shifted irreversibly. The court-martial and its political consequences dominated headlines, leaving little room for distraction. Meanwhile, political opponents capitalized on the situation, framing it as evidence of leadership failure and ethical lapses. Campaigns, advocacy groups, and media outlets leveraged the controversy strategically, highlighting the scandal in both national and local contexts. By evening, the cumulative effect of legal scrutiny, political pressure, and public judgment had reached a tipping point. Kelly's position within the Democratic Party remained precarious, while Jasmine Crockett's voice had solidified as a central figure in the ongoing discourse. Her clear, articulate critiques underscored the expectations of accountability and leadership in modern politics, setting a standard that resonated far beyond the immediate scandal. As the nation watched, it became increasingly clear that this was not merely a story about one individual. It was a moment that prejudiced broader questions about political responsibility, public trust, and the power of media amplification in shaping perception. In the final analysis, the scandal surrounding Mark Kelly's court-martial was more than a legal or political controversy. It was a case study in the modern intersection of media, public opinion, and leadership accountability. With viral coverage, strategic communications, and powerful commentary driving the narrative, the consequences extended far beyond the courtroom. The events of these days had reshaped political calculations, public expectations, and the trajectory of a high-profile career, leaving a lasting imprint on Washington and the national conversation.